A device that flew relatively under the radar, mostly because when it was first announced, a bunch of Nintendo Switch 2 stuff was coming out, a few other handhelds from the very same company came out around the same time. So one that I completely missed and is actually relatively interesting given its form factor in similarity to so many other handhelds out there. The Retroid Pocket Classic was announced roughly around the same time as the Flip, a little bit after, so I actually just fully missed it. I even remember mentioning it in that video, but at the time we didn't have enough information for me to make a full thoughts video about it. But now, pre-orders are live, you could buy it now, and you should have it within a couple of weeks or so. Better late than never, but I finally remembered this thing's existence and decided to make a video about it after seeing some people already made videos talking about it. But I am always late. This device has some pretty interesting specs. Overall, it is your standard DMG style handheld. And if you're familiar with something like the iNeo Pocket DMG, it is incredibly similar to that device, with some massive exceptions, like its price. At $129, let's just say $130 to make it simple, it is actually not a terrible deal, and it has a pretty interesting spec sheet. To start, it uses the Snapdragon G1 Gen 2 chipset. It has 4 GB or 6 GB of memory, it has active cooling, 64 gigs of storage, a 3.92, basically 4-inch AMOLED screen, 1240 by 1080. Unfortunately, it doesn't seem to support video output, but that just says NA in the spec sheet. I suspect it does, but it just might not work at the moment, or might be a firmware thing. It has a Type-C and a headphone jack and an SD card slot. It runs Android 14, which is nice, 5,000 milliamp hour battery. It supports 27 watt fast charging, and overall, it's a pretty complete spec sheet. But what I find most compelling is that G1 Gen 2 processor. Most of you probably know that I really dislike the iNeo Pocket DMG. That device makes my blood boil because it is so expensive for no reason, purely because it has so many things in it that aren't going to be used for the majority of games that you're going to be playing on this device. Because it's important to bear in mind that this is a DMG styled handheld. You're not going to be playing 3D platformers, first-person shooters. This is designed mostly for 2D platforming games, Pokemon, your average 8 16-bit titles, maybe some 3D titles that happen on newer systems, but predominantly happen with D-pad and normal face buttons. The lack of analog sticks can be quite frustrating depending on the game you're trying to play, especially if it's even a 3D platformer from like the N64 era, which, granted, the hardware in this device well exceeds the power requirements, so no concerns about being able to run those games. It's about whether or not you can control those games at this point. And that's my biggest problem with the iNeo Pocket DMG. That device has a Snapdragon G3X Gen 2 in it, and that is an incredibly powerful chipset. It is on par and exceeds the Odin 2, which is one of the most powerful handhelds on the market, capable of even PS3 emulation. So it begs the question, why does a handheld that's intended to run mostly simpler titles need to be so powerful? Realistically, it doesn't, and it's probably because they had a deal with Qualcomm and they just sort of needed to put it in all their devices. And technically, Retroid now has a relationship with Qualcomm, hence why they're getting chips like the G1 Gen 2, and potentially the whole reason why they're still getting Snapdragon 865s, which at this point is like a 5 or 6 year old processor. Still very good on the older side at this point. So that makes the use of the G1 Gen 2 actually pretty neat. It should be roughly as powerful as the 865, probably a little bit faster thanks to new architecture. We haven't gotten hard data to suggest massive performance increases, but it is in line with its price. And for the kind of handheld it is, it makes a lot of sense. this device has an amazing design, it looks fantastic, so it makes a lot of sense for people who were going to buy the Pocket DMG from Neo to buy this instead, mainly because it's more available now than the other one, and it's more than half at the cost. Frankly, to me, that is a way better investment, especially considering in all the other DMG premium handhelds like the Analog Pocket all serve a very particular niche. And in my opinion, you probably should get something from like Anbernic for like 65 bucks if you wanted a DMG style handheld. But some people do like having the extra power because it's not just an emulation handheld in some cases. Sometimes you do play Android games that might require extra power, and maybe you're just fine with these controls. For example, you can play games like Stardew Valley natively on Android, and it has all the buttons you need to do that. While technically you can play games like Stardew Valley through Portmaster on Anbernic and other cheaper handhelds, it won't be nearly as good of an experience as you would probably on this device in comparison to many others. Essentially, this is the best cheap Android handheld out there at the moment. There aren't very many at this low of a price point that also run Android. The only other one that comes to mind is the Anbernic RG556 and the Future 557. But currently, this is one of the more cheap devices that is pretty darn powerful considering where it's at, and at a decent enough price point that I would consider recommending it to many other people. Just the caveat being, it is a DMG style handheld, and for a lot of people, that's not going to be okay. But for those of you out there who love that style of handheld, this might be the perfect solution. It should be more powerful than the Anbernic 406V, which is an Android-based handheld with the same chipset as the 556, but it's a little bit slower because of the less cooling mass. So it's going to be a little bit slower than all the other handhelds out there in comparison to it in that sort of price bracket. And this device should be faster than that one. So to me, honestly, this becomes the new default DMG style handheld recommendation. And at least in my opinion, completely blows the Neo Pocket DMG straight out of the water, because that thing is so horribly overpriced. I highly doubt any amount of people who bought that is worth how much they spent probably in R&D to make the thing. Sort of an Apple Vision Pro situation. No, that's way too harsh. I suspect it didn't cost nearly as much in R&D to make that device, but it's still terrible. Just conceptually bad. You were wrong and it's bad. I guess though, it's bad purely because of how much it costs. If per se it was $150 or $200, maybe my sentiment would be a little bit different. Maybe I'd just be, oh, it's a little expensive, but if you have the coin, it could be worth it. But I just don't see any world where that device makes any amount of sense for anybody because it's so darn expensive, when you can get the same or better experiences on handhelds like this one from Retroid. I would love to hear what you guys think about this new device from Retroid. Are you interested in DMG style handhelds in general? Or are you completely satisfied with your current Miu Mini or other smaller DMG style handheld? I would love to hear what you guys think about these down below. Don't forget to leave a like, comment, and subscribe. All the other social media garbage down below. And last but not least, have a wonderful day.